morning, everyone. Welcome to our second Christmas around the world. We're featuring Bosnia today, and I have a new friend from Bosnia. He actually lives in our little country neighborhood. He's a across the street neighbor from our son Matt. So working with him, he's a good guy. I like him. So he's going to tell you his life, how he got to the U.S., Christmas, and so here you are. And your name is Sasha, and I can't pronounce your last name,
yes.
So you tell him.
I will do it. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
I'm Sasha Andriashevich. Pretty simple pronunciation, and let me move over so I can actually flip through my slides. But yeah, I am been living in Byron now 4 years, I want to say, right next to Matt and Priggy. And yeah, they were kind enough to ask me to see if I wanted to, that was I think this summer, right? We initially talked about this. If I was willing to come here and present about some of our traditions that we did in Bosnia during the holidays, during Christmas. So yeah, we're going to talk a little bit about that, and then I'll talk about my family and my personal life. So, like I said, we'll go over where is Bosnia. A lot of people might not know. I'll go a little bit about the history of Bosnia, not too deep, I won't put you to sleep. And then I'll go over some of the Christmas observations that we as a family did in my town. Obviously that differs from town to town, from region to region, so, but I'll give you kind of my spin on it of what we did, what I did with my grandmas, with my parents, and get your thoughts on it. There we go. So Bosnia, where is it? This chunk of a map, I'm assuming most of you are familiar, so this is where Germany is, Switzerland, Czech Republic, France is over here, Spain would be down here. Bosnia is sort of right in the center of it all, with Sarajevo being the capital of Bosnia. My hometown was like 50 miles north of Sarajevo. It was called Zenica. That's where I grew up. But yeah, Bosnia was at one point the former Yugoslavia. You might have heard of that. So that used to consist of Slovenia, Croatia, Serbia, Montenegro, and Macedonia, and Bosnia, of course. So they all used to be part of the former Yugoslavia. And unfortunately, during some of the civil war in the early 90s, all those countries split up and became their individual nations. As far as Bosnia and its history, I mean, it's got a really long and rich history. Obviously, the country dates back many, many years, or the people that lived in that region. There was various occupations that have influenced some of these traditions that I'll be talking about. Obviously, the Roman era, roughly around 980 or so. That's kind of brought a lot of the Italian, almost like the Christian religion and influences into that region. Obviously, we also had the Ottoman Empire. That was roughly in the 1300s where it started, the occupation of Bosnia. So you'll see, not necessarily in my presentation, but Bosnia does have a large Muslim population as well. It's actually the largest population of all the regions there. And that's, of course, because of the Ottoman Empire and that Turkish, I guess, influence. Austrian-Hungarian occupation, that was roughly in the 1870s or so. That's where Bosnia saw more of that German, Austrian influence, more of the traditional Christian influences as well. Shortly after World War after World War I, Bosnia was under the Kingdom of Yugoslavia occupation, I guess. And then during World War II, after the maps and whatever else was redrawn, Kingdom of Yugoslavia became Yugoslavia, which consisted of those 6 countries that I was just mentioning, and Bosnia, of course, was in those. And then the unfortunate part, which I had to live through, was the Civil War in the early 90s. So I was born in 1982, so I am, 41 now? And I'll get more to this story, but I left Bosnia in 1994. And the war, depending on where you were, started roughly 91, 92, and lasted through 95. So that's the unfortunate part of my story. And then, of course, Bosnia became its own nation in 1992, where it was claimed its independence from Yugoslavia and became one of its own. Like I said, 2 primary religions. Islam is roughly about 51% of the population in Bosnia. And I should actually mention this. I think the population of Bosnia, don't quote me on this, I want to say it's roughly around 3 million, so it's a pretty small country. Anyways, Islam is roughly 51%, and then Christianity is about 46%, and that kind of breaks down into the traditional Catholic religion, and then the Orthodox, like Greek, Serbian Orthodox is the other religion that's predominant in Bosnia in today's world. Christmas traditions, because of the list of those nations that I just listed and the different occupations and religions, obviously Christmas traditions tend to be a blend, a little bit of everything. So the traditional Catholic Church, which I grew up as a Catholic, or am a Catholic, I guess, we follow the Gregorian calendar. So Christmas Eve, for example, falls on the 24th of December, Christmas Day 25th, January 1st is your New Year's Eve day. Pretty standard, what we see around here. The Orthodox Church, they go by the Julian calendar, which is 2 weeks difference, I believe. So their Christmas Eve is January 6th, Christmas Day is January 7th, and then New Year's Day is January 14th. Using our calendar. Technically, it's different dates in their calendar, but they're about 2 weeks apart. Which actually makes it super fun, because since Bosnia was this blend of all these different cultures, I had friends that were Muslim, Orthodox, Catholic, so it just ends up being like this 2-week, 2-month party of you just going from one house to the next house celebrating their holidays. As far as Christmas traditions, I'm going to start a little bit early. For various reasons, Bosnia is a third world country. It's getting better, but growing up, there wasn't a lot of, I don't want to say money, but people lived generally a rougher, tougher life, I should say, so there was a lot of manual preparations and whatnot. So early Christmas preparations actually started in the fall, where we would start harvesting plum trees to make plum brandy. Traditionally served in one of these little cups or glasses, and it's actually really nice because you won't spill. It's really strong. It's essentially plum moonshine, but it's fun. And that's, when you do that month of partying, that's pretty much what you're drinking at every house, plum brandy. So that is, early fall, you're harvesting the plum trees, letting them ferment, and you make your plum brandy later. We also make sauerkraut. I don't do this today. I think it's technically illegal. Actually, it's only illegal if you sell it, so it's probably fine. But I do make my own sauerkraut. It's not the traditional sauerkraut like the German sauerkraut that you see, but we make that in preparation for Christmas too. Primary reason, and I didn't bring that today, but one of the main dishes we make for Christmas is called sarma. There are these cabbage rolls that you put like ground beef in it and cook them up. It's really yummy. Hence the reason for making the sauerkraut early in the fall/winter. Normally like around November you do this. And I just did my barrel, put about 15 heads of cabbage. I'll show you the next slide. The other thing we do early mid-November, back home, I don't do it here anymore, is you generally end up butchering a cow or a pig or whatever you had. And this is literally done at grandma's house in the farm, butchering it. And then you do that to make smoked meat and sausages, other types of meat. You let them smoke in a smoker for about a month. It takes about that long for them to be really nice eating, nice tasting and smoky and dry and whatnot. And then that's one of the main dishes, cut up meats, and I'll show you some pictures later of what's served during these Christmas holidays. How does it all look like between these early preparations? This is meat sitting in the smoker, so it's generally just the chunks of bacon, other types of meat that you cut up. I don't have sausages in here, but then you sort of cut that real thin. It's almost like beef jerky, but you cut it real thin every party, or every celebration, I should say, and it's super yummy. This is a traditional plum brandy moonshine mechanism. So yeah, you put the fermented plums in here, you boil them, the condensation goes up, cools down, and plum brandy comes out. There is more chemistry behind it, I don't know. My grandpas knew how to do this. I never figured it out, I was too young when I left. And then this is how we make the sauerkraut. So we take the entire head of cabbage, we hollow out, it's probably hard to see for you guys, but you kind of hollow out this core and you fill it with salt. So it's, if you have high blood pressure, it's probably not good to eat. But yeah, you fill it with salt and you put, I don't know, 10, 15 heads of cabbage in a barrel like this, and then you just cover it with water and you let it sit in your basement, generally in like a cooler spot. I just did my barrel, well, me and my dad do it together, about 2 weeks ago, and it's sitting in my basement, and I still have one head from last year that's sitting in the basement. So it does not go bad, it ferments, it smells like sauerkraut, not the prettiest smell, but it is a really good taste. So that's kind of the early stuff that we did as a family to prepare for the Christmas holidays. I'll now go into more of the traditional observations, and surprisingly, you won't see that many differences between the Christmas observations you see here versus what we did. But some of the main things that we observed is lighting of the candles of the Advent wreath, so the 4 Sundays kind of leading up to Christmas. I think a lot of churches observe that here as well. That's one of the observations we did. St. Nicholas Day, which is an interesting one, that's on December 6th. I'll go into that in a little bit. Planting of the wheat on St. Lucia, I think you say it, but it's Lucia is how we say it. That's on December 13th. I'll go over that a little bit. I thought that was interesting to share. And then, of course, Christmas Eve, December 24th, and Christmas Day, December 25th. Again, all these are based on my experiences and my family and what we did. So, Advent lighting, generally, the 4 Sundays before leading up to Christmas, it's a typical wreath that you see here with 4 candles on it. Each one is lit every week. What that consisted for our family, church visits, doing prayers at home, and lighting the candle every week. In the old days, as I'd like to say, we actually did this as well. The kids would go out and collect twigs and pine cones to make the wreath for their mothers. Nowadays, obviously, with the country becoming more modernized, and we're all getting lazy, so everybody just resorts to going and buying them in the store. But yeah, that's one of the sort of traditional Christmas observations that we do leading up to Christmas. The next one, which I think is interesting, I'm sure the kids are good, which is St. Nicholas Day, as we would call it. St. Nick, Santa Claus, that's where that connection comes from. It's generally for well-behaved children that see this. But what we did is that was the actual traditional gift exchange. So you as a child would put a boot the night before by your window or by the front door, and then next morning, St. Nick, who looks just like Santa Claus, oddly enough, would fill the boots with candy, generally small gifts, candy, suckers, and then maybe put some money in the boots as well. So that was, for us as children, that was kind of like the big deal. St. Nick is coming and they're gonna bring some sort of gifts for us, if you are a good kid. Obviously, this is very similar to a Christmas stocking that we do here in the US. And Saint Nick is really representative of today's Santa Claus, in my opinion. But that was always a fun tradition. Generally, you get some sort of candy. And back then, when I was little, you know, it's not like every day you had candy, so when you do get candy, it was a big deal. Little gifts that meant a lot for us as children. Next one is interesting, which is the planting of the wheat on St. Lucia's Day, and this is December 13th. The tradition behind this, it's meant to invoke like a good harvest for next year. It's a symbol of fertility and new life. It kind of looks like this once it's grown, but generally it's planted in a small dish or a bowl, and it's put wherever you end up placing your Christmas tree. Neighbors and friends kind of use it as a conversation starter, or they joke with each other, like, oh, your wheat doesn't look too good, what are you doing? Or if somebody's wheat looking really grow, thick and strong, like in these pictures, they would brag about it. But it was a fun joke. And then the kids, we really enjoyed watching it because it's almost like an advent calendar. You kind of could tell by the time it gets to a certain height, you're getting closer and closer to Christmas. So it was a fun thing. I don't know how it really started, why we were doing it, but it was always done in our family, and it was kind of a fun thing to observe. Christmas Eve, so I took some, these are not my pictures, these are pictures from the internet, but just kind of wanted to share how a typical Christmas Eve would look like. You would prepare for Christmas Eve dinner in the evening, and for Catholics, if you were like a fully observant Catholic, it's traditionally a fasting day, so you're technically not supposed to eat meat on Christmas Eve. So the dishes that would be prepared, like for us in our family, we would make these beans with garlic, and it's almost like refried beans. And then we would have these, they're called pita, they're like this pastry dough filled with potatoes or eggs and cheese. Again, no meats, at least for the early part of Christmas Eve. So you would kind of do that, prepare the food, and then on Christmas Eve, we as a family would get together and do our prayers, which is, I don't even know anymore, but like 3 Our Fathers, 3 Hail Marys, whatever they were, right? The typical prayers. And then you would have the candles, generally from your wreath, that we would use to play a candlelight survival game for kids, which is actually interesting. We would use the plum brandy that I was referencing earlier, and they're generally like 50% alcohol, so they're really strong. So what you do is, during the dinner, you would light up the candles, generally 3 or 4, and each kid would pick one. And then the dad, or the eldest, grandpa, whoever's at the table, you'd take a piece of bread, you'd soak it in the plum brandy, and you'd kind of tap the candle tips while they're burning, obviously. And then that additional alcohol will kind of make it spark or add additional flames, and then kids use that to like, oh yeah, this is my candle, I'm gonna survive, I'm gonna live the longest. And that's the joke. Whose ever candle stays lit the longest is gonna live the longest. So, obviously, dad or grandpa, whoever's doing the tapping, controlled how hard they tap the candle. But as you can imagine, when you're having Christmas dinner, kids are anxious. Kids are not really paying attention during, or at least I didn't, during prayer. So this was kind of to break it up a little bit and make it a little more fun for the children while they were doing that. Plum brandy, like I said, you'll hear me reference that a lot. We do go back to it. Even at a young age, you kind of get exposed to not like drinking it, but just tasting it and trying one shot at, I don't know, maybe 9, 10-year-old, but just one for the evening. I should have brought some next time. Generally, my grandma always made us do this. There was a late evening mass, normally around 11 p.m. is when you go on Christmas Eve and you would go to church and all your friends would come and you'd do like an evening Christmas Eve prayer with songs and the typical Christmas service you would see here. But it was really fun. It was in the evening, and after the Mass, you would actually return home and continue your festivities. And the nice thing is for the meat eaters, the fasting day would technically be over once you come back from church. So whoever wasn't eating meat, you know, they're allowed to eat the pigs, the sausages, whatever was made earlier. So generally the preparations, the traditional Christmas Eve dinner is a fasting, so beans, fish, depending where you were. But then once you come back from church and later on in the evening, you would be eating just all the other food that was prepared, which included, you know, cookies, baklava, which some of you might have had already. It appears it's almost gone, so that was made by my mom, not by me. But that's kind of the traditional Christmas Eve day, and then the actual Christmas day, 25th, believe it or not, it's very similar to Christmas Eve. Sretan Božić, I wanted to say that, that's how you technically say Merry Christmas in our language, but of course that's celebrated on the 25th. Normally it's celebrated with your immediate family. You do opening of the Christmas gifts. That's more of a newer tradition. Like I said, traditionally it was more the same next day, but as the world is becoming more, I'm going to say, westernized, Bosnia, or everybody almost in the world is kind of picking up these similar traditions of doing the opening of the Christmas gifts on Christmas Day and not so much the December 6th. You prepare for more food, more visitors throughout the day. People that were feeling good and weren't feeling too rough from the festivities of the previous day would go to additional Christmas Day church services. Again, normally driven by grandma, not so much the younger. And then as far as how it's kind of weird, you would sort of start with whoever's the oldest in the family. So my dad was the oldest of 7. So whenever we had Christmas Day, the rest of his brothers or sisters would come to our house first, because my dad was the oldest. And you would sit for a couple of hours, have a little bit of food, and then you go to the next brother or next sister, kind of try to follow that path. And it gets to be actually really tiring, because if you have a big family, you're really visiting a lot of people in 1 or 2 days. And you're like eating the same thing. It's like going to like 6 Thanksgiving dinners, right? Like how much turkey can you take? But it's fun. It's, again, this is my experiences from about 30 years ago. Families were a lot tighter, a lot closer back then. I think things have evolved and changed where people are staying home more now. But that's the observations that I experienced as a child in Bosnia. So that's what I'm sharing with you guys. But yeah, Christmas Day, and then actually the festivities will continue on to the 26th and 27th. Generally they were like national holidays where people weren't working. So depending how big your family was, the Christmas Day celebrations could extend for a couple of days extra, which was super fun. I'm going to share some pictures of how a typical Christmas dinner would look like. We're huge into bread. Carbs, if you're not a carb person, you would not survive in Bosnia. But, I mean, you would love it, but probably not. So as you can see, a lot of bread. This is that sarma that I was referencing that's made with the cabbage. Some of the smoked meats that are cut up. And then just your typical, jump over here, typical dinner setting. Some of the smoked meats that were cut up in here, homemade bread, and that was the wheat that I was talking about that's planted. Cookies, cakes, baklava, all sorts of stuff. I'm going to show that on the next slide a little bit more. Sorry, my presentation is more about food than anything else. So again, this was the baklava that some of you have had that my mom made for us. Generally made with walnuts and sugars, and probably not healthy for you either. Sarma, that's the cabbage roll with hamburger and rice in the middle. This is really yummy. Some cut up meats, meat platters. This is that pita that I was talking about that's kind of made of this, I don't even know how to describe the dough, but yeah, you really stretch the dough, and this is all made from scratch, by the way. You make the dough, you stretch it out real thin, and then you fill it with cheese, potatoes, or meat, and then you kind of roll it up and spiral it into a pan and bake it. It's really good. This is another version. I was hoping to make this today for you guys, but I didn't get a chance to do it. This is another way to make this pita, but it's more of a layered approach, almost similar to the baklava, but this one is made with like cottage cheese and eggs and whatever else. So kind of like a easy way out. This one you just buy the phyllo sheets. This one, which I cannot make, my mom does it, and it takes forever, but this is 10 times better in taste than something like this, in my opinion. But yeah, those were kind of the traditional food. Of course, the plum brandy. I brought a couple of these that I had at home. I don't know how much it's in here, probably like 2 shots worth. Served in these little, they're called czerkancic, these little glasses, and again, made out of plums. Really strong. Generally, the reaction when people take a shot of plum brandy is like, ooh. But the second or the third one is generally where they start to taste it better. But yeah, growing up, you know, poor, I shouldn't say poor, but this was the drink that everybody had. There wasn't like, oh yeah, you want whiskey or you want this or you want that. This is what people made, this is what you had. So it was kind of a no-brainer for anybody. So that, in a nutshell, is sort of Christmas, and now I'll talk a little bit about my personal side of my story, how I got here, and some of the traditions that I try to continue. I know I've hinted at it a little bit, but who are we? This is me and my family. Myself, my wife Nicole, Dominic, Penelope, Evelina. I moved out of Bosnia, like I said earlier, in October of 1994. War broke out in 92. We left in 94. Not a fun time, not fun 2 years at all. The city I lived in did not really have that much, I'm gonna call it street fighting. There wasn't really any of that going on, but our city was under siege. So food was really problematic for about 9 months, which was not fun. And in 1994, my dad packed up the one car we had. It was a Skoda, if you're familiar with that car. And it was me and my brother and my mom and dad got in the car. He, whatever money he had, bought a brand new battery for the car, because we didn't really drive the car. He didn't have money for gas. Again, keep in mind, this is during the war, where shortages of everything, no gas really, so everything was super expensive. Saved some money, filled up the car with gas, bought a brand new battery, and we drove off. And we drove from Bosnia to Croatia. It was a 5-day trip, essentially. Again, this is during war times, so you kind of, what would have been normally a 1 or 2 day drive, I should say we moved to Germany first. That was our final destination, but it took us about 5 days to get there. Spending nights at different friends and families, sleeping overnight, super stressful. Luckily, I was a kid, didn't really understand what was going on, but I can't imagine what my mom and dad were going through. Pick up your belongings in one car, leave your parents behind, leave your friends behind, and start a new life. So, thankfully, Germany accepted us as immigrants and moved to Germany in 1994. It was November, I think, so that first Christmas in Germany was really tough, but we were in a safe place. We had what we needed, and forever grateful for Germany and the Germans. The unfortunate thing, or fortunate, however you want to look at it, Germany didn't offer us permanent residency. They would give us like 6-month visas, so every 6 months you would have to go and sort of renew your visa. So, love Germany, love their food, love their people, but the way we had to live during that time, it was really kind of the unknown, right? 6 months, what's gonna happen in the next 6 months? What's, you know, are we gonna be able to stay or are we not? And they sort of used that, they would evaluate what is the situation in Bosnia and is it safe for us to go back? So that was kind of Germany's decision process of how their refugees could or could not stay. So because of that uncertainty in Germany, we did apply to come to US. That, we moved to US in 1998 to Rochester, Minnesota. How all that worked out was another set of unfortunate events, but in the long run they ended up being fortunate because of these guys. But my aunt had a set of 2 twin boys. They were about 2 at that point. They lived in Bosnia, and one of them got leukemia. And they tried to cure him in the hospitals in Bosnia and Croatia, and they couldn't. And somehow, I don't know how, to be honest, but Mayo Clinic heard of that case, and Mayo took them as like a charity case, I guess, to try to cure the little boy. So they moved to Rochester, like right, I want to say like 1991, so right around when the war started. And unfortunately, the boy didn't make it. He did pass away, but they, in a long run, ended like sponsoring another cousin of ours, my dad's sister, and then my dad's sister was able to sponsor us to be able to come to US. So that was 1998, and that's how I ended up in Rochester. And it was, I believe, through like Catholic Charities. That was the organization that kind of coordinated the whole visit, or I should say visit, the whole migration, I guess. So yeah, tough times in Germany. Coming to the US made it easier. When I moved to Germany, I didn't speak a word of German. Luckily, in like 6 months as a child, you learn it quick. But that was the first shell shock for us in the family of cultural differences and, you know, going into the unknown. Coming to the US in 1998 was easier, you know, doing this the second time around. And also like English, I've been taking English since first grade as like a secondary language, I guess you can say it. So coming here was a lot easier because I spoke a little bit of English, and it was super easy to get acclimated from that perspective, from the speaking side of things. But it was still hard. Moving to high school, I think I was a freshman at Mayo High School when I moved here. So it's tough moving to a high school as a US student, let alone, you know, moving to a different country. But you get to it, you get used to it, you make it through. Anyways, enough of my sad story. All that came out actually really good because I met my wife Nicole in 2008. Nicole grew up in Redwood Falls area, but I met her in Rochester. She was going to school in Rochester, so we met, and we have those 3 little ones there, Dominic, Penelope, and Debbie. And this is, we went to Croatia and Bosnia this summer, so these are some of the pictures from that trip. What we do for Christmas, it's hard, right? Like I'm living here, like I've lived in the US for, what, 25 years now, so it's really like my home now. But we try to keep some of those Christmas traditions. This is an older picture of my kids. I couldn't really find any, but we still decorate the Christmas tree every year. We put up Christmas lights. Matt always gives me a hard time. He's like, why you're making me look bad? You're putting Christmas lights up in our street. But yeah, I still do that. Like I said earlier, I make the sauerkraut, and I'm proud of that. I'm going to try to continue that tradition. My brother doesn't do it, but I try to do that. I still make some of the homemade breads and some of the dishes that you saw earlier. I don't smoke the smoked meats that you were seeing earlier. I don't have a smoker or like a smokehouse, whatever they're called. But I do, there is stores here that you can purchase some of that stuff, so I still continue to buy those, especially around the holidays. And actually my kids love it too. And then we sort of do a blend, right, of like the traditional observations you see here, like the westernized observations, I'm going to say, and then we also keep some of the Bosnian traditions that we've had just to kind of keep it alive. And to show you that I'm not lying, this is actually stuff that I made, other than the sausage. I bought the sausage, but this is homemade bread that I make and my homemade sauerkraut. The sauerkraut, like I said, it's generally in a head that you can make those cabbage rolls, but what you do is you cut it up, and it's a little different than the traditional sauerkraut because it's covered with water. It's got more of a coleslaw texture. It's a little crisper, it's a little fresher, but it still has that sauerkrauty smell and taste. So if you don't like sauerkraut, you would love it, but I think it's great. And we use it as like a side salad generally to eat with all the other dishes and whatnot. So it's pretty good. This is it. My house in Rochester. This is again older house, but that's my mom and my dad. My brother's not in the picture. He must be taking the picture. But these are my brother's kids. Anyways, this is a Christmas Eve dinner at our house. We kind of try to keep that tradition going in today's world as well. And, you know, we really enjoy it. My kids, you know, they're almost 11, like I said, 11, 9, and 6. We try to go to Bosnia every now and then. We went in 2018. My grandmas were both alive at that point. And then we were gonna go again, unfortunately with COVID and whatnot, we didn't really feel safe traveling. Actually, I don't think you could even travel at that point. We were gonna go back in 2022, but then the situation with Ukraine kind of broke out, and Ukraine is far away, but still it's Europe, right? And we didn't feel safe going with our children that year, but we did make a trip this summer to go to Bosnia. So this is my hometown. My house was, or my parents' house I should say, is right about there. We try to take our kids, we want them to, they don't speak my language, I don't think they ever will, but we try to show them the culture, show them the people, show them where I grew up, what we had to go through. And it was kind of interesting. The first time we went with them in 2018, you know, Dominic was, I think, 6, Penelope was 3, this one wasn't even 1. So they didn't really remember it from our first trip, but it's kind of fun to watch them going back. And as they're getting older, they're kind of appreciating the food, the culture, the people, the nuances. And that's kind of what we try to do and hope they will pick up some of these traditions and continue doing what I've been doing, what I've been trying to learn from my parents. And one thing that if there's anything that you can take away from this, moving to different countries as an immigrant is a tough time. So if you see people coming from different countries, you know, be sympathetic to them. It's tough what they're going through, what they have to live through. You know, nobody wants to pack up their things and leave their home country just for the hell of it, right? Sorry. But we had to do it, and kind of keep that in the back of your mind. I think it's generally here in the US, people have been very hospitable. Germany, same thing, people have been hospitable. If you're good to them, they will be good to you. And if there's anything to take away, that would be my suggestion. And that's all I got. Thank you all. Yes.
I have a question.
Sure.
Food related, of course.
Of course.
So that thing that you make that's rolled in cabbage, is
Yep.
it actual cabbage, or is it, do you take the leaves off the head before you make sauerkraut out of it?
The sarma,
Yeah, it's rolled with meat and...
Yep. So that is actual, or it's fermented cabbage, right? It's the sauerkraut cabbage, but yeah, it is fermented. Yeah, so it's super
I can't
soft.
wait to try that when you have us over.
My mom's gonna love you. Yes.
What do you do as a job?
Oh, here? I work for the Mayo Clinic. I am a technical business analyst, so sort of working on the IT side. I work for the Center of Digital Health of Mayo Clinic, and I have been there for almost 8 years now. My educational background is, I guess I didn't really go into too much of my personal story, but I studied electrical engineering at St. Cloud State, so that's my educational background, and did that for a while, kind of commuting to Minneapolis and whatnot. But as the kids got older, started school, I kind of took the role at Mayo Clinic about 8 years ago, which kind of lines up with the ages of the kids. It was just harder with driving them to preschool, and we actually open enrolled our son into Byron when we lived in Rochester, so like we had to drive him to school, drive the girls to preschool, so it was just getting to be too much, so that's when I started my job at Mayo Clinic.
Are you aware of many other families that are relocated to this area from Bosnia?
Yes, there is actually I'm going to say a fairly large population of Bosnian people. I think most of the people living here, not that it matters, but majority is Muslims that live, Bosnian Muslims that live in the Rochester area. But I'm going to say there's probably like 3,000 to 5,000. Yeah. So like the International Spices and Grocery Store downtown, I know they sell a lot of like Middle Eastern food, but they also sell a lot of Bosnian food. And so like if you want to buy some of the smoked meats that I was referencing to, they do sell it down there. So that's where I get it from. Yeah. Yes. It's funny, like trips to Bosnia. So this summer when we went, it was me, my wife, and our 5 kids. My brother, his wife, and his 2 girls. They're older now. They're like 20 and 16. And then my parents actually went as well. So it was the first time in 30 years that we were all back in our hometown at the same time. Normally it would be like staggered, it's hard to align PTO and whatnot, but with my parents retiring last year, we were able to go last year, all of us together. And to your question, if we were to stay in a hotel, I think our family would kill us. It's tough, there's a lot of us. You don't get the most comfortable bed, but yeah, we're staying with my mom's sister or my dad's brothers or whoever's family, friends. But yeah, we stay with them, we see them every time we go back. So my dad's got 2 sisters that live in, and this is like Bosnia and Croatia. We kind of visit both of them. And my mom's sister and her husband live there. And it's kind of funny, like, as you're growing older, for example, my parents, we lived in the house where my mom's grandma lived. So you just kind of add on top and add on top, right? So as the families are growing, you're just kind of staying in the one house and you just keep adding additions. So that house is still there. Obviously my grandma, I should say obviously, but yeah, she did pass away during COVID, so she's no longer there, but my mom's sister lives there. And it's kind of neat to go back and actually sleep in the house that I grew up in. And it's kind of different too, like everything's so small now. But yeah, they would never let us stay in a hotel, at least when we're in Bosnia. We normally spend a week with family, and then we spend a week on the beaches in Croatia, and for that we do rent like a vacation rental house or whatever they're called. And that's actually more of a normal vacation, I would say, for us when we go back. The first half when you're with the family, they're excited to see you, we're excited to see them. You're staying up late, you're not getting really any rest, but it's always fun to go.
Sasha, do your mom and dad and your brother live?
Yep. My brother lives in Rochester. My parents live in Rochester as well. My brother works for Mayo. Works for Mayo Clinic. And then, both my parents are retired right now. So yeah, that's kind of neat. There's 4 of us, and obviously our families are growing, but at least we were able to move from these different countries. We were always together. There is situations that are worse than what I've experienced where, you know, even the immediate families have to get separated, like the dad stay behind or the mom and the kids left. We fortunately did not have to do that, but, so we're all together.
Okay, one last question.
Yeah,
Can you tell us how to say Merry Christmas again?
yeah, Sretan Božić. Sretan Božić, yep, Sretan Božić. Yeah, enjoy your holidays.
Is it
and
okay if we say Merry Christmas?
Yeah, Merry Christmas to everybody. I'm sure I won't see you, but it's a fun time. We enjoyed this month and looking forward for some of the food.
Thank
And
you.
Randy, I'll get you up that song.